This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good night everyone. Thank you everyone for coming. If you get hungry about 10 minutes through, we're going to stop for another Suda, so don't worry. A fundamental idea in Judaism and Ashkafas HaTorah is the concept that there are Daled Malchios, there are 4 empires, there are 4 Golios, there are 4 exiles that the Jewish people have to endure. This is such a fundamental concept. It's spoken about very often in the Midrashim. In fact, the second pasuk in the Chumash, "V'ha'aretz hoisa soihu v'avayu v'choshech al pnei sahaim," the earth was astonishingly empty with darkness. The Medrash immediately comments that this is a reference to the Daled Malchios. So far, many of the shurim we've given have been extemporaneous, but tonight is going to be very textual, very text-based. The Medrash you have on your sheets, they're Mar Makaimas, I hope everyone has. Does everyone have Mar Makaimas? The Medrash in Bereshis Rabbah, Parsha Beis, Ois Daled, Rish Lakish, interpreted the second pasuk of the Torah to be referring to the Daled Malchios. Says the Medrash, Toihu is Bavel, Vayhu is Madai, Babylon, Media, like the pasuk says, Vayavhilu lahavias Haman. Yavan is Greece. That's referred to by the word Choshech, because the Yavanim darkened our eyes with their decrees. And then finally, Al Pnei Sahaim, on the face of the abyss, is a reference to the 4th Golos, the longest Golos, the Golos that seems never to end. So obviously this is a very fundamental idea that there are going to be 4 exiles, if it's already alluded to in the very second pasuk of the Chumash. So again, what are the 4 exiles? You have Babylon, Bavel, Madai, Media, Yavan, Greece, and Edom. In fact, if you look in Parshas Maseh, Eila Maseh b'nei Yisrael, Megala Amukos says, Eila is Roshei Tevos, Aleph, Edom, Maseh, Madai, Beis, Bavel, Babylon, Yisrael, Yud, Yavan. This is a reference to the 4 Golios. It says in Megala Amukos, you look at the cantillation, the trup, Eila Maseh b'nei Yisrael, Azla Geresh, we were chased out, we left. Azal, we left. Geresh, we were chased out. Munach, Ravi, and we were placed in the 4 Golios. And what are they? Eila, Maseh, B'nai Yisrael, Edom, Moav, Bavel, Yavan. Okay? So this is just a reference to the Daled Golios. Okay, that's a very well-known idea. There are 4 exiles. However, what I would like to bring to your attention is that if you look in Tehillim, Perek Vav. Now, Perek Vav should be very familiar to you, except for the first pasuk of the Perek. Perek Vav, Ashkenazim say twice a day, and that's Tachnun. Put our heads down, and we say, Hashem, al bi'abcha soichicheni v'abachamascha siyasreini. Mysteriously, it begins with a pasuk that's omitted, and the pasuk is, Lam natseach b'neginois al hashminis mizmar leDavid. Lam natseach by the conductor, a song about 8. The song about 8. Or Al Hashminas. Well, we'll see. According to the Medrash, a song about 8. Okay? Now, just today it occurred to me why we may omit this pasuk when we say Tachna. And that is the Medrash Shachartov, number 3. It's a Medrash on Tehillim. It tells us, Davar Acher Al Hashminas, the 4 Golios, the 4 exiled are really 8. And which is the 8th, says the Medrash? Edom is the 8th. What are the 8? Says the Medrash, Bavel, Kazdim, Babylon, and the Chaldeans. By the way, Nebuchadnezzar was a king of Bavel. His son, Evel Merodach, was Kazdi. His grandson, Belshazzar, was Kazdi. His great-granddaughter, Vashti, was Kazdi. Then you have Madai Uparas. The Gemara says in Megillah, Madai and Paras, they made a deal with each other. One is going to be the head, one's going to be second in command. Then you have Yavan and Moikdan. Yavan and Moikdan, Greece and Macedonia. Alexander the Great was the Macedonian Empire, and after him it divided into 4 into the Greek Empire. And then, wow, the Medrash tells us the last 2, Yishmael ve'Edom. Yishmael ve'Edom. Now, if we're going to be a stickler for the way the Medrash positions the names, first Yishmael and then Edom. Okay? Pay close attention to that. And by the way, the Medrash ends that when Hashem redeems us from the 8 Golisim, we're going to sing Shira to Him. Says the Medrash, Ribbon Shalom anu mekalsim lefanecha b'sha sha'ata mekabe soisanu mishmayna Golios. when you redeem us from the 8 exiles, we will sing Shira to you. Says the Medrash, L'kach nemar al hashminis. Perhaps that is why we omit this pasuk when we say Tachnon. We're not yet ready to sing Shira for the Rebbeinu Shalom taking us out of the 8. We haven't been taken out of the 8 yet. So we're reserving that pasuk for when it's relevant to us. That's just a thought. Rashi and Zechariah quotes the Medrash, but he makes one important change. Rashi says, at the end of Parakeh of Zechariah, Rashi says the 4 Golios are really 8. What are they? Bavel, Kazdi, Madai, Paras, Antiochus, which is Yavan, Maikdan, Edom Yishmael, says Rashi. First Rome, and then Yishmael. So while the Medrash says Yishmael and then Rome, Rashi changes it Rome and then Yishmael. Why? I can't answer that question. I'm just reporting the facts. I come here tonight not to offer any new insight. I'm just a reporter. Rabbi Shalom Shajan used to say that he used to give over from his Rabbeim. He says, I hope I'm at least a kosher pot. I'm trying to give over to you authentic Divrei Chazal. I hope nothing on my part sullies what the Chazal are saying. I don't offer, I'm just presenting the facts to you. That's what Rashi, the way Rashi says over the Medrash Shechatov, he switches the final two, Edom and Yishmael. And in fact, the Arizal, in Parshas Kiseitze, Likutei Torah, says Arizal that Nebuchadnezzar saw a monster in a dream. The monster had a golden head. The golden head was Bavel. He saw a copper body. That was Yavan. He saw arms of silver. The arms of silver were Paras and Madai. And then he saw 2 legs. The longest parts of the body are the legs. Says the Arizal, the 2 Golusim that are reflected by the legs are Edom and Yishmael. These are the 2 longest Golusim. And certainly today, we're definitely in one or the other, or both. That's what we're in today. Ba'achras hayamim, Golus Edom and Golus Yishmael. Even though when the Midrashim bring down what the 4 Golusim are, they always say Golus Edom, and Yishmael never made the list of the 4. We're going to have to deal with why is Yishmael not on the list of the 4? Why does Yishmael only make the extended list, but they don't make the main list? Okay. I want to bring to your attention a Gemara in Avodah Zarah. I'm going to be citing many sources, and then we're going to try to put it all together. Says the Gemara in Avodah Zarah.
Which number?
Number 6. At the end of days, says the Gemara, Rebbeinu Shalom is going to come with the Sefer Torah. And he's going to make a big declaration. He's going to make a big announcement. Whoever learned this, come and get your reward. So the Gemara says all the nations are going to clamor. All of them are going to be vying for the ultimate reward at the end of the days. Says the Gemara, the first nation to enter the room is who? Rome. Rome enters first. Ask the Gemara, why does Rome enter first? The Gemara says, they are the most chashav. And the Romans are going to say, we deserve reward for Torah. After all, Harbe Shvakim Takninu. We built many storefronts. Harbe Marchatzoi Sasinu. We made many bathhouses. We minted coins. Why do you think we did it? The only reason we did it is to facilitate the learning of Torah. Whereupon the Rebbeinu Shalom says, you fools, that's not why you did it. Maybe that in my plan, that's why I orchestrated that you should do it, but that wasn't your intention. Fine. The Gemara continues. After Rome vies for the ultimate reward, you know who comes in next? Lo and behold, the last nation in the world that you would have expected to come in next, Persia comes in next. Paras comes in next. And Paras says, Rebbeinu Shalom, who more than us is responsible for the learning Torah of the Jewish people? God says, what did you do to facilitate learning Torah? Says the Persians, what do you mean? We conquered many cities. We waged many wars, the Gemara says on the second wide line. We made many bridges. And the only reason we did it is so that the Jewish people should be able to learn Torah. Whereupon God says, who are you kidding? That's not why you did it. That's not your motivation. That wasn't your thought. That wasn't your kavanah. And they leave empty-handed. Ask the Gemara, why only Rome and Persia are the 2 nations that come to ask for reward? Why dafka these nations? Okay, I want to Take a look inside. Don't take my word for it. Look at number 6, the last 2 lines. Says the Gemara, Maishnahani de chashivi, umaishnahani de loy chashivi. Why dafka Rome and Persia make the claim that they should get the ultimate reward? And the Gemara says these are the 2 most important, the 2 most distinguished nations, Paras and Roimi and Paras. Why dafka them? Listen to the words of the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Mishum dahanoch moshchi malchusayu adaasi mashicha. Because only Rome and Persia will last until the end of days. Only Rome and Persia will last till the end. Now, it's usually assumed that the Western world, United States of America, is the forebearer, it represents Rome. Fine, you want to say United States of America will last until Mashiach comes? That's good with me. We have a tradition from Rabbi Chaim Belazner. There are 10 Golusim, 10 lands. America is the let's the Golus. Fine. But Persia will last until Mashiach comes? It's not true. The Persian Empire crumbled hundreds of years ago. Alexander the Great came, conquered Persia, and there is no remnant or relic of the Persian Empire today. Whoever is in that country today, you want to say it's American Iran? Okay, maybe. But generally, historians assume that those people who occupy Iran today maybe be from China or all the way at the east end of the world. You want to say that's what the Gemara means? The last 2 nations to stand, America and Iran? Maybe. But simply, historically, whoever is in Iran today is not the Persian Empire. Persian Empire crumbled in the times of Alexander the Great. And therefore we have to understand just simply what in the world does the Gemara mean that Paras is going to last until the end of days. Okay, that's the first thing we have to examine. Also another very important point, is we look around the world today, and which 2 nations are in the news besides Klal Yisrael? You have United States of America and the Arabs. Why doesn't the Gemara say the Arabs are the most chashuv? Because they're going to last until the end of days. Why are they not discussed in this Gemara? Let me refer you to one more Gemara. The Gemara now talks about the final battle, the last war. Call it what you want. Call it World War III. Call it Malchemes Gog uMagog. Give it any name you want. This is the final war. The Gemara says in Yuma Daf Yud. Okay? A landmark Gemara. Every Jew needs to know this Gemara. Daf Yud Amud Aleph. Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Asida roimi shetipo biyad Paras. Rome will fall into the hands of the Persians. That's a scary thought. Because if Rome is America, that means America is not the final nation to last. That's what the Gemara says openly. That Rebbe said, Rabbi Huda Hanasi, Rome will fall into the hands of the Persians. And the Gemara cites a pasuk that Persia, by the way, Tiras was the youngest son of Yefes. The Gemara cites a pasuk, the youngest son of Yefes will end up conquering the world. Okay. And then the Gemara says, Rabba Babar Chana, 5 lines down, son of the name of Yochanan, also, Rome is going to fall into the hands of the Persians. And the Gemara makes the following Kal V'chomer. If you have trouble falling asleep tonight, just think about this Kal V'chomer. Kal V'chomer in Latin, a foratory argument, if that helps. But the Gemara says like this. Who built the first Beis HaMikdash? Shlomo HaMelech, the Jews. Who destroyed it? The Babylonians. Who conquered Babylon? The Persians. Says the Gemara. If the first temple, if the first Beis HaMikdash, which was built by Jews, destroyed by Babylonians, the Persians conquered the Babylonians, that means Persians are so powerful, they could even conquer those who destroy a temple. Then the second Beis HaMikdash, where the Persians themselves were the ones who built it, right? Who built the Bayis Sheni? Koresh? Daryavesh? The Persians built the second temple. And who destroyed it? The Romans. Certainly the Persians will defeat the Romans. That's the Gemara's argument. The Gemara says if the Persians could defeat those who destroyed the first Beis HaMikdash, if the Persians could defeat the Babylonians, then certainly the Persians could defeat the Romans. And therefore, according to Rabbi Yochanan, Persia will be the last nation standing. What? The Persians will be the last nation standing? There are no Persians today. What in the world does the Gemara mean that Persia will defeat Rome? Persia will defeat America? How's that possible? The Persian Empire is long dust. There is no relic. There's no remnant. But the Gemara says openly, the last nation standing will be Paras. And then the Gemara brings a dissenting view. Look at number 7, the bottom line of number 7. Amarav asida parash atipo biad roimi. Yeah, all you proud Americans, you'll be happy to hear that according to Rav, Persia will fall into the hands of the Romans. So you could wear your American flag proud to know that before Mashiach comes, the last nation standing will be USA. Gold medal, right? So that's Rav's opinion. So if I ask you, who's the last nation standing? Rome or Persia? It's a machlokes. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and Rabbi Yochanan, they say Persia. Rav says Rome. We still don't understand what's Persia doing, how they make it to the stadium, how they make it to the fight. They're long gone. So now we have to open up the sugya. Comes a Maral like a flash of lightning, and this is the key to what we're going to discuss tonight. And the Maral asks the following question in 2 places. This is in Ner Mitzvah, in his commentary on Chanukah, and then Chidushei Agados on Masechta Avodah Zarah. I'm sorry, I'll be very happy to take questions. I'm very pressed for time. They're rushing me already. Okay. So the Maral asks like this. Ask the Maral, if you look through world history and you try to discover who are the most powerful empires, definitely Rome would have to make it up there to the top. After all, the Roman Empire, already about 2,000 years old. But certainly in the mix would be Ishmael, the Arabs. And the question is then, why in any discussion of the Daled Malchios does nobody say Yishmael is one of the 4 empires, one of the 4 Golosim? Maral gives 2 answers. They're both extremely important. They both deserve a shir by itself. Answer number 1. Says the Maral, the definition of a Golos, the definition of a Malchus, is someone who usurps the Jewish people's power and dignity and majesty. We had a Beis HaMikdash. We had Shechina in the first Beis HaMikdash. The Babylonians came. They usurped our power. They became the rulers of the world. They were Malach Bekipa. They ruled over the entire world. And we were nothing. They took our Kayach. The Gemara says the relationship between the Jewish people and Esav, Kishazeh kam, zeh nafal. It's like a seesaw. Why? Because there is one melucha, and either it belongs to us or it belongs to the Daled Goliath. So along come Babel. Babel takes our power. Babel is conquered by Paras. Paras is conquered by Yavan. Yavan is conquered by Edom. But Yishmael, says the Maral, Yishmael's power has no connection with the power of Klal Yisrael. We don't find anywhere, Rav Hutner points out, we don't find anywhere that Klal Yisrael and Yishmael can't be successful at the same time, or both can't be unsuccessful at the same time. You don't have this seesaw relationship between Yishmael and Klal Yisrael. Why? Because Yishmael has an independent source of Kayach. It's not usurping the Melucha of Klal Yisrael. What is it? It's the tefillah of Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu davened to Hashem, Lu Yishmael yichya lefanecha. If only Yishmael could live before you, God. And Hashem said, you know what? Uli Yishmael shematicha. So therefore, Yishmael's malchus, Yishmael's power, is not usurping the Jewish people's power. The other malchus, Babel took ours, Madai took theirs, Yavan took theirs, Edom took theirs, and then when Mashiach comes, Mashiach will reclaim the former glory of the Jewish people. But Yishmael's majesty, Yishmael's glory is independent, and therefore they don't make it to the list. They're not in the Hall of Fame of Jewish oppressors. They have to be in like a different, we'll put an asterisk next to Yishmael. They don't make it to the list. In order to make it to the list, you have to be someone who usurps the power of the Jewish people. That's answer number 1. But says the Maral, you ready if you came here tonight just to hear this? It's earth-shattering, says the Maral. V'yoser nireh, what's more apparent? Yishmael hu malchus paras. Yishmael is Persia. Whenever Shas talks about Persia, it refers to Yishmael. But what do you mean? The Persian Empire crumbled, and Yishmael is still here, and ethnically and traditionally, there's no connection between Persian Empire and the Arabs? The answer is, the Maral is Machadish, and it's not on Yeshit, it's in the third place, that when the Gemara speaks about the four Malchios, it's not a description of their ethnicity or traditions. There are four types of oppressors. One general category is Persia, and they're defined as nations that wage war, nations that build bridges, nations that conquer, nations that steal. And under that umbrella is Persia and Yishmael. So it's not that Yishmael comes from Paras. It's not like ethnically they're the cousins of the Persians. Paras is an umbrella for a certain type of Golos. And therefore, says the Maral, whenever you see Paras in Shas, whenever Talmud Bavli talks about Paras, it's a code word for Yishmael. So if you take that and you understand that, everything that happens in the world today is crystal clear. Why is that? Because the Gemara says, back to number 6 and 7, the Gemara says at the end of days, the two most prestigious nations are Rome, Edom, and Paras, Yishmael. America and the Arabs. Those are the two most distinguished nations. Why? Says the Gemara, those are the two only powers that will last until the end of days. There's no Greek Empire. There's no ancient Egyptian Empire. The only powers that will exist until the end of time are Rome and Paras. But what's Paras? Paras is Yishmael. And what we've come for tonight is we want to know who stands last. In the final war, who stands last? Is it Yishmael or is it Rome? Is it USA or is it the Arab world? So you say, if I were to ask you that question now, what would the answer be? It's Machloikes Tanoim. It's Machloikes, that's the Gemara in Yuma. Look at number 7. Right? If anybody wants to know what will be, before Mashiach comes, the final battle between Roimi and Paras, which the Maral defines as Yishmael, who's going to win? You have a Machloikes between Rebbe and Rabbi Yochanan. The Gemara says, Rebbe and Rabbi Yochanan say, ding, 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 who's going to win? Paras, Persia, the Arabs. The Arabs. That's the opinion of Rebbe. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. Whether you like it or not, you could always buy a ticket now. The final winner before the end of days, according to Rebbe and Rabbi Yochanan, in the opinion of the Maral, is Paras. And Rav is of the opinion that no, Rome will win. America will win. So you could stay put. It's Machlokes Tanaim. So I ask you a question. Who do we paskin like? By the way, we wish both sides tremendous hatzlacha. But who do we paskin? Who's going to be? Who stands last? Machlokes, Rebbe, and Rabbi Yochanan against Rav. Rav Tanahu Palig. Who stands last? So I don't know. It's an Agadata Gemara. How am I supposed to know who stands last? Okay, I want to bring to your attention before we come to that point, I want to introduce you to a concept that we're all familiar with, but there's a certain nakuda of that concept which is not so well known, and I just want to bring to your attention something from the Vilna Gaon which is really astounding. The Gemara in Sukkah is one of the first sources. We know there's a concept of Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David. You don't have to go to any mystical sources, any Kabbalistic sources. It's a Gemara in Sukkah, look at number 10. The Gemara in Sukkah says, Vayareni Hashem arba charashim, Ribban Shem showed me 4 carpenters. Says the Gemara, Man ninhu arba charashim. Who are the 4 carpenters? Amar Rav Huna bar Bizna, Amar Rav Shimon Chasida, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben Yosef. I'm only quoting to you a Gemara, so you see this is a concept found in Shas. There's something called Mashiach ben David, there's something called Mashiach ben Yosef. It's a Gemara. There's a Medrash Tanchuma, and I want you to pay close attention to the word usage of the Medrash. The Medrash says, Meshalchei regel hashar, who is the ox, the shar? Zeh Mashiach ben Yosef. Mashiach ben Yosef is compared to a shar, an ox. Why? Because we know Yosef is what? Bechar Shoyroi Hadarloi. The Hachamor, the donkey, is a reference to Mashiach ben David. Why? Because Mashiach ben David is Ani V'roichev al Chamar. Not a horse. I know you went on the horse and buggy ride today, but it's not a, right? It's a Chamar. If you want to see a Chamar, you go behind the hotel, you go for a walk, you could see a Shar, you could see Chamar, you could see Sus also. But we're not talking about the Sus. Shar is Mashiach ben Yosef, Chamar is Mashiach ben David. What's the meaning of that? Why is Shar compared to Mashiach ben David? Why is Chamar the other way? Why is Shar compared to Mashiach ben Yosef? Chamar, Mashiach ben David. Okay. So now we wanted to know, the Gemara in Yuma has this historic machlokes about the historic battle. Who stands last? Roimi or Paras, which according to the Maral is USA versus the Arab world. Who stands last? We want a psak halacha. So guess who weighs in on this? None other than Reb Chaim Kanievsky. But where does Reb Chaim Kanievsky weigh in this? Well, we have to look at a very important part of the Haggadah, and that is the very end of the Haggadah. And that is Chad Gadya. Chad Gadya, a beautiful song, right? Well, let's just get the storyline in case you were out by that time of the Haggadah, right? You have the goat. The goat was purchased for 2 coins. The cat came along. The cat bites the goat, eats the goat. The dog bites the cat. The stick hits the dog. The fire burns the stick. The water puts out the fire. The ox drinks the water. The shoichet shechs the ox. The Malach HaMaves kills the shoichet. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes care of business. Where does Chad Gadya come from? So there is one of the Haggadahs called Mar Belasaper brings down that supposedly it was discovered in the Beis Medrash of Rabbi Eliezer Migarmaiza. So we're talking about more than 800 years ago. Already it was found in the times of Rishonim. What's the purpose of Chad Gadya? The Tashbates is quoted, and I looked in all the Svarim of the Tashbates, it does not appear there. And many Svarim ask that they don't know where the Svarim got that the Tashbate said this, but supposedly the Tashbate says that the purpose of Chad Gadya is, the Rambam says the night of Pesach, that you shouldn't go to sleep, you should fall asleep from speaking about Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. So the Baal Haggadah put in the Chad Gadya, which is some kind of mystery, and everyone's going to offer their opinion. Who's the cat, and who's the dog, and who's the stick, and who's the shar? And this way it elicits conversation, and people will stay up until they fall asleep, mitoich Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. Says Rabbi Yaakov Emden, no, that's not the reason for Chad Gadya. What's the reason for Chad Gadya? Here you are, you're sitting the night of Pesach, especially in a hotel. You're sitting there like a king. You ask the waiter, what's the main? The waiter said, you have 3 choices. And you say, I'll take all 3, right? You're sitting there like a melech. Says Rabbi Yaakov Emden, you might become a little haughty. You might become a little conceited. You might start to feel a little arrogant. And therefore the Haggadah ends with Chad Gadya to scare the living daylights out of you. Now I don't know about you, but I'm not sure how frightening. My family, Chad Gadyas, have different sound effects for all the different animals. It's not necessarily the most frightening part of the Haggadah. What is so frightening about the Chad Gadya? Comes along Reb Chaim Kanievsky, and Reb Chaim Kanievsky very conveniently plugs in the Rashi that we started with, and the Medrash Shochatov that we started with. And again, we made reference to the fact that when Rashi quotes the Medrash Shochatov, he switches around Yishmael and Edom. Well, Rashi says Yishmael Edom. While the Medrash Shochatov says Yishmael Edom, Rashi says Edom Yishmael. And Reb Chaim Kanievsky prefers to go with Rashi's version as opposed to the Medrash. And this is what he says. How many bad guys are there in the Chad Gadya? Conveniently, you have 8 bad guys, right? So Reb Chaim just plugs in Lam Natzech Al Hashminis, the 8 Golios. So, says Reb Chaim, let's start with, well, the goat we know, we're the goat, right? We're the goat. In Tanakh, the Atain Soini, Soin Marisi, Haman, the Targum Sheni says, Klal Yisrael dance on Sukkot like a bunch of Gediyim. We're the Gedi. And Ribbon Shalom purchased us for the 2 Zuzim, the 2 Luchais. Okay, so far so good. Comes along the cat. The cat is Bavel. If you look in Sefer Yeshaya, the pasuk says that the Babylonians are called Iyim, which the Targum says are Chasulim, cats. Come along, Belshazzar. Belshazzar is what? Bavel, Kazdi. Belshazzar is Kazdi. And Belshazzar takes the kelim of the Beis HaMikdash. And who does he feed it to? Who does he give to eat in those kelim? The Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah, he gave it to a bunch of dogs. So he's the dog. The Persians, the Chaldeans are the dog. Comes along Daryavesh, comes along Koresh, and the Medrash says in Shir Hashirim that they took Belshazzar and they shattered his skull with the menorah, which is like a stick. So the Persians are the stick. Along come, the Medians are the stick. Comes along Achashverosh. Achashverosh is a Persian. And he's like the fire, says Reb Chaim Kanievsky. It's Vachamosoi Ba'araboy. The Medrash says when Achashverosh was about to get angry, Ribbon Shalom said, stoke up those coals, heat up the coals. So Achashverosh is like the fire. And then comes along the water. The water is Macedonia. Gemara and Talmud says Alexander was full of arayos like water, the Gemara says. And then comes the Shar, which is Yavan, who made the decree that the Klal Yisrael should write al Keren Hashar, Ein lochem chelek b'elokei Yisrael. And now we have two more jobs left. We have two more jobs. We could put up a sign, two openings, two jobs, job availability. We have a shoichet, and we have a malach hamaves. And we have two possible workers. You have Edom and Yishmael. Truth is, both of them fit the bill perfectly. They would both be good at either job, shoichet or malach hamaves. So now the $1 million question is, while the Gemara in Yuma says that who's the last to stand, Rebbe and Rabbi Yochanan say the last to stand will be the Arabs, Paras, according to the Maral. And according to Rav, it's going to be Roimi, America. What is Reb Chaim Kanievsky paskin about this issue? What does he have to say about this? Says Reb Chaim Kanievsky, in the time of the Kra, the shoichet is Edom. The shoichet is Edom. Why? The Gemara in Pesachim says Edom is like a shoichet. And who gets the job of the Malach HaMaves? Yishmael. Says Reb Chaim, we're going to go with the Shita of Rebbe and Rabbi Yochanan, that Paras will be the last to stand. That's a very frightening thought. Growing up as a kid, everybody knows you're in Golus America, Edom, and then Edom will fall and Mashiach will come. No one ever even heard of Golus Yishmael. Yishmael? Yeah, there's some Arabs, they throw stones, they throw rocks, they get in the way. But as a world empire, as a world force, as the final force, as the final empire. But that's what that Arizal says. The last two to stand are Edom and Yishmael. And certainly there's a very significant opinion that Yishmael will be the last to stand. In fact, if you look at number 19, well-known Zohar, the Zohar says, Ein lecha galos kasha liYisrael k'may galos Yishmael. The most difficult. You think of all the tragedies of the last 1,000 years in Europe, in Germany, in Poland. Zohar says the most difficult Golos is Golos Yishmael. So I want to bring to your attention a very important idea, the Pirkei de Rabbi Elazar, and we're going to elaborate. Back to the four Golosim. Okay, remember Yishmael doesn't make the list. He's not on the list of the four Golosim. The Maral says either he's Nichlal and Paras, or he's disqualified for the reason we mentioned earlier. The Pirkei de Rabbi Elazar also makes reference to the four Golosim. Although this is a pasuk by the Bris Bein Abasarim, when Avram Avinu had the Nevuah, the covenant of the parts, and the Medrash says, V'hinei ema chashecha gedoyla noifeles alav, says the Medrash, says the Pirkei de Rabbi Elazar, number 20, ema is Malchus Revius, which is Edom. Chashecha is Yavan, that we already saw. Chashecha, that the Yavanim were machshech einenu with their gzeros. Gedoyla is Paras Umadai. Noifeles is Bavel. Alav is Bnei Yishmael. So here, look, you see clearly. Yishmael is not a Malchus. Yishmael is not a Galus. Yishmael is just there. But look carefully, says the Medrash, She'aleihem ben David Yitzmach. That Mashiach ben David comes by which Galus? Galus Yishmael. The Medrash doesn't say Mashiach ben David comes by Edom. The Medrash says Mashiach ben David comes by Yishmael. I want to tell you something very remarkable. One summer I went to visit my grandfather. My grandfather has been a Rav in Pittsburgh, I mentioned, since 1951. He's a Holocaust survivor. I was looking through his notes, and I saw in his personal notes that when he was in Auschwitz, he describes one of the most horrific imageries that you could possibly think of. That he was in Auschwitz, and Eichmann was there, and Eichmann invited a special guest to Auschwitz. And that was the Mufti from Jerusalem. And before that, one of the most difficult moments in Jewish history was when the Germans were blitzkrieging through North Africa, and they made their way to Egypt, and they were miles from Israel. And the Jews in Eretz Yisrael were fasting, they were saying slichos, and the Arabs, when they heard the Germans were coming, were broadcasting on the radio, Jews, we're going to spill your blood, we're going to bathe in your blood, we're going to abuse your wives. That's what the Arabs were broadcasting on the radio. And a nace happened. Nace Gadol HaYasham. People don't know. The British had the mandate at the time, and the British were testing out their water pipes. And they tested out their water pipes with seawater. And the Germans were fatigued in the desert, and they tapped into the pipes. They thought they were going to get some water. They drank the seawater. They became famished. Rommel had to turn around. If not for that, chas v'shalom. It was a tremendous miracle. Why were the Germans coming right through Israel? Because they had an alliance with the Arabs. So my grandfather writes that he saw Eichmann and the Mufti embracing arm in arm, and Jews would pass before them, and the Germans would bash the Jews in a way that they would not be able to have children. That was their simcha, and the two of them were laughing. So to think in your mind, just think about Eichmann and the Mufti. It's a very frightening image. And when I saw the following, I saw this quoted, the Gra in his commentary to the Safra D'Tzniusa, this is unbelievable. I saw Rav David Cohen quotes in one of his svarim. The Vilna Gaon says the following. Vilna Gaon says, Esav and Yishmael are the two dangerous powers that will last until the end of days. Esav is the branch of Cain. Cain was the Bechar. Cain was the Roitzeach. Cain was the one who wanted to be Mezaneh with Hevel's Tuma Yisera. So he is Esav. Esav is from Cain. Esav was the Roitzeach. Esav was the Megal Arayos. And then Hevel was a little bit of a better guy. Yishmael comes from Hevel. Yishmael did tshuva because Hevel was a little bit better than Cain. Okay. Says the Vilna Gaon, you can look at it, number 23. Esav and Yishmael are represented by two animals. Esav is the par, the shor, the ox. And Yishmael is the chamor. Why is Yishmael the chamor? Am hadoimel lechamor. Shavu lachem payim achamor. Who was Yishmael's mother? Hagar. Hagar was from Mitzrayim. Asher besar chamoirim besaram. So Esav is the shor. Yishmael is the chamor. Says the Goin. That's why there's a lav of loisachrois shor v'chamor yachtov. You know why you can't plow with an ox and a donkey together? Who cares? An ox and a donkey. What's so terrible? Says the Goin. The ox and the donkey represent the combined destructive forces of Esav and Yishmael. Says the Goin. Hashem does not want these two forces to join together. Why not? Says the Goin. If Esav and Yishmael would ever join together, they would destroy the world. Says the Goin. The Rebbeinu Shalom says, so as soon as Esav sees that Yitzchak's not so happy with him, Vayelech el Yishmael vayikach es machlas. Esav goes to be mizdavig with Yishmael. My grandfather wrote in his personal memoir, when he saw Eichmann and the Mufti, it was a kiyum of this pasuk of Yishmael and Esav getting together, and now they have the kayak to destroy the world. By the way, the Goin writes in many places, Esav and Yishmael produced the Kelev, Amalek. The force of Amalek is the union of Esav and Yishmael. The image of Eichmann and the Mufti is the image of the most destructive force the world knows, and that's the image of the combination and the combined forces of Esav and Yishmael. Says the Goin, and I feel compelled to share this with you. The Gemara tells us there's something called Mashiach ben David, there's something called Mashiach ben Yosef. It's a Gemara, I didn't make that up. It's a Gemara. Why do you need Mashiach ben David? Why do you need Mashiach ben Yosef? Says the Goin, Mashiach ben Yosef is called what? Shar. Mashiach ben Yosef is going to take us out of Golus Edom. Esav is the Shar. Mashiach ben Yosef takes us out of Golus Esav. And what's Mashiach ben David called? Chamor. Ani v'roichev al Chamor. He takes us out of Golus Yishmael. Yishmael is the Chamor. Am hadoim el Chamor. It's not two epic periods. It's each Golus needs another Yeshua. The Yeshua of Edom is Mashiach ben Yosef, the first one. But who stands last? Reb Chaim says. Reb Chaim Kanievsky says, in the historic battle between Edom and Yishmael, Roim is the Shoichet. Yishmael is the Malach HaMaves. Who does Rebbeinu Shalom save us from? Mashiach ben, according to the Goin, Mashiach ben Yosef is for Golus Yishmael. Mashiach ben Yosef is for Golus Edom. Mashiach ben David is for Golus Yishmael. That's the understanding in the world of the Goin. Comes the Kavayosher. Kavayosher is a classic Musar Sefer. He also says the exact same thing. He says, you have two Mashiachs, you have two Golusim. Mashiach ben Yosef is for the Golus of Esav. Mashiach ben David is for Golus Yishmael. Says the Kavayosher. You take the two words Edom and Yishmael, 2 minutes. We only have 2 minutes. And then the world comes to an end, right? We have the two words, Edom and Yishmael. What is the numerical value of Edom and Yishmael? 502. Asher Besar Chamorim Besaram. Basar Basado Treifa Loi Soichelo. Basar is 502. Says the Kavayosher, Rebbeinu Shalom gave us a counter force to Edom and Yishmael. And the counter force is Abraham lived 175 years. Yitzchak lived 180 years. Yaakov lived 147 years. 502 to counteract the Kayach HaTumah of Esav and Yishmael. But basically, what these sources are telling us is we've been accustomed to thinking, here we are, this is the last stop, this is the final Masa before the end of days. Maybe yes, maybe not. Bottom line is, the Rambam says in Hilchos Malachim, that when it comes to these type of things, nobody really knows. Nobody really knows until it happens. The Rambam says, don't spend too much time thinking, speculating, analyzing. The Rambam says it doesn't bring to Yiras Shamayim. But this is what the Goin tells us. And it's important for a person to know. There are two Golusim. There's Golus Yishmael, there's Golus Edom. There's Mashiach ben Yosef, there's Mashiach ben David. If you look in the Baal HaTurim, in the beginning of Parshas Toldos, the end of Chayei Sarah, Baal HaTurim also seems to be saying, like the opinion of Rebbe, like the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, like the opinion that Reb Chaim Kanievsky injects into the Chad Gadya, and that is, Baal HaTurim says, if you look at the end of Chayei Sarah, it talks about the Nesim of Yishmael, Al Pnei Kol Echav Nafal, the Nefila of Yishmael, and then the beginning, V'yela Toldos Yitzchak. Yitzchak, throughout Shas, by the way, all the Sfarim say Yitzchak is always reflection of Mashiach. V'yela Toldos Yitzchak. What's the juxtaposition of Al Pnei Kol Echav Nafal, the Nefila of Yishmael, and the Tzemicha of Yitzchak? Says the Baal HaTurim, the Samechlei number 26, V'yela Toldos Yitzchak, Loimar, Kishayipol Yishmael, Biachris Hayamim, Az Yitzmach ben David, Shehumi Toldos Yitzchak. Baal HaTurim saying the same thing. It seems, according to many of these sources, if not almost all the sources, that the final Golus will be Golus Yishmael. Pirkei Rabbi Glatstein says, why is he called Yishmael? Because at the end of days, Klal Yisrael is going to cry out to Ribbono Shel Olam from the tzara of Golus Yishmael, Va'asidin HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'shmoya Tfilasan. So we're mispalel that all the sons of Yisrael should have a mapala, especially Roimi, especially Yishmael and Ribbono Shel Olam should be mekabel all of our tfilos. We should be zeicha to the binyan Bayis Shlishi, which, by the way, Chassam Sofer writes in his Hagah on the first siman of Hilchos Pesach from the Meiser Rokeach. Chassam Sofer uses this for halacha. Sorry, I have to say it. Chassam Sofer uses it for halacha. Chassam Sofer wants to argue on the Magen Avram. We don't say Tachnun, the whole Nisan. Magen Avram says, because since the majority of the month has already passed the Kedusha, so we'll throw in the last 7 days. Says Chassam Sofer, you don't need the Magen Avram. Why? Because we have a tradition for the Masei Rokeach, Chassam Sofer quotes, that the Bayis Shlishi will be built on Pesach. Chassam Sofer quotes it, Kaf HaChaim quotes it. But we're going to have a dilemma, because you cannot be mechanech a Beis HaMikdash on Pesach, in ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. That's why the last 7 days of Nisan are reserved for the chinuch of the Bayis HaShlishi. So we should talk about Zoicha. The Ribbono Shel Olam should send us the binyan Bayis Shlishi, and we have another 7 days here. Maybe in the hotel we'll come over. We'll be able to eat there for another 7 days with the simcha of the third Beis HaMikdash. Meher b'yameinu, amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.